All right, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. I'm Bob Galen, and this is my colleague, Mary Thorn. Mary, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
And it's our pleasure to be part of EuroSTAR's online event. We were invited to do that, and it's a real pleasure for us to talk about something that we're passionate about. We call it the 3 pillars approach to Agile testing strategy. And for the next 45, 50 minutes, no more than an hour, we're going to talk about this. We'll explore what we mean. We think it's an important, not an advance, but a way of thinking that really makes a difference in your Agile testing from a management perspective, a leadership perspective, from a strategy perspective. So this workshop isn't really for practitioners. It wouldn't hurt to be a practitioner to listen to us. But it really is from a leadership and from a strategy point of view. So let's get going. So I'm Bob Galen. I'm an independent Agile coach. I think that's a recent picture. So maybe I've gotten a little bit more, a little whiter in the beard since then. I'm a principal Agile evangelist at a company called Velocity Partners as well. And I've been doing Agile for I've been doing software for more than 30 years, doing Agile, and everyone says it, but I have been doing it from the beginning of agility around the late 90s to 2000 is when I started. I'm a little biased. I'm pretty perky about the methodology, and I think it is the best way to build software. It's not a silver bullet, but it's probably the most humane way. I sometimes refer to it as the most humane way to build software. And then
Hey, my name is Mary Thorn. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance at Channel Advisor. I have a broad testing background that spans many different technologies and systems, different methodologies. At the end of the day, I love Agile testing. I love Agile software development, and have come to love teaching everybody how I feel like this is the best way to get testers incorporated in Agile teams and getting the whole team ready to do the things that we need to get done from a testing perspective.
And Mary rocks. I'll just say that right off the top. Mary rocks, and she understands. So I'm sort of the in the clouds, in the 30,000-foot level person who talks about strategy and stuff. And I know what I'm talking about, but I'm usually at a high level. Mary brings it down to practicality. So you'll hear me hand-waving and talking about stuff that's a little cloudy and a little high level, and it may not work. And then someone will bring me down and ground me in the real world, and that's Mary's job, is to actually bring my ethereal thinking down to the real world and make it work. The genesis, I want to talk about the 3 pillars genesis. First of all, I've seen way too many teams, and both of us have, who are just testing in Agile teams without a map or a plan for improvement. And that was the genesis for one of the key starting points for the 3 pillars is I think testers, now developers and companies and organizations, they may have an Agile strategy. Not always, but it's pretty common that there's a technical Agile strategy. But usually the quality aspects and the testing aspects are lagging behind, or they're not even in there. So another way of saying it is it's developer-driven rather than being holistically driven. And that bugs me. I mean, it's really wrong. You don't even need to add QA and testing. You need to build it into the strategy. And so that's one of the things that the 3 pillars is trying to do, is to move away from that developer-centric or technology-centric play and make it holistic, where you're including quality, you're including testing practices, and you're doing it across the board. You're doing it in a balanced fashion, and you're doing it from the very beginning. And that's what the next thing is. Really, balance is important. If there's a key to the 3 pillars, it's not focusing on just one thing. And to illustrate that point, I have a true but a sad tale. So not that long ago, I visited a client or a potential client at Agile Shop, a relatively large financial firm that was all in on Agile. They've been going all in Agile for 1 or 2 years, and they've been practicing it. They had classes in. They had folks that came in to do training for Cucumber and for Gherkin and for BDD, And when I visited them, it was a few-day visit, and I was just poking around, and I was just seeing what was going on. And I noticed on day one that they had thousands, and I'm not exaggerating, but literally thousands of gherkin or cucumber tests running. They were heavily in on acceptance test-driven design or development, or ATDD. And they had all these tests running, and they had information radiators, and they had dashboards, and they had reds and greens. And there was a good bit of red, but they had green as well. And from their perspective, they were developing a lot of the stuff in their Agile teams. And on the surface, it looked like this was a very advanced Agile installation, and I was feeling really comfortable. I'm like, holy cow, I can learn a lot from this company. They're very advanced. They're all in. They have mature Agile practices.
Agile coaches.
They had Agile coaches. The coaches were all over the place. It was actually wonderful, and they are wonderful. It's not a bad company, but one of the things I noticed, it dawned on me. I was invited to a backlog grooming meeting. And it hit me in the face in the grooming meeting that the team that I was just sitting in and watching, they were an advanced team, if you will, from an ATDD perspective, but they couldn't write a story to save their life. And I'm like, holy crap, what happened? They literally didn't understand a user story. They didn't understand collaboration. They didn't understand the conversation around the user story. They literally couldn't write them very well. And then this aha moment hit me. I'm like, well, where are the acceptance tests coming from? Because if you understand ATDD, the acceptance tests come from the stories, and you can program them, you can automate them, but the tests themselves are business value tests. They should be coming from the product owners. And I was like, well, where are these thousands of tests? If the teams can't write a story, where the heck are these things coming from? And they were coming from them using the tool and the technique to basically build what I would call functional tests, or just test coverage. And it was their youthful enthusiasm sort of getting the best of them. And they were imbalanced because they lost the connection. The acceptance tests don't have value by themselves. They have value because they're connected to the customer. They have value because they're driven from conversations. They have value because they're creating these three amigos, and we'll talk about that concept later, three amigo conversations. So my point is, here you have a group that on the one hand is incredibly advanced and mature, on the other hand is immature, almost to the point of infancy, and they were out of balance. And that led to me thinking, well, how do we rebalance them? How do we communicate to that organization what balance looks like? So what does good look like? What does balance look like? And I put on my thinking hat, and I've been sort of grappling with this three pillars stuff before that, and it crystallized in my mind that pillars. And I wasn't fixed on the number, but there's certain core things that have to be happening in parallel, in balance, to create a healthy Agile quality environment and a healthy Agile testing environment. So real quickly, this is the three pillars. There's some foundational stuff at the bottom, and we're going to drill into all of these. So Mary's going to take it, in a few minutes. Mary's going to sort of do some deep dives into each one of the pillars. So hold on to your hats and don't worry. We'll get into a little bit more detail. Like I said, I'm the hand waver. But the foundation part is at the bottom, and just to touch on it, foundational elements are like whole team ownership of quality. For example, the counterpoint, the anti-pattern would be the QA folks or the testers own quality, and that's very bad from my point of view. It's not a healthy balance. The right balance is every member of the team owns quality. Now the testers have expertise there. They're practitioners. They're experts. They're craftsmen. That's where their passion is. So they can lead the way, but everyone needs to own quality. We need to focus on building the things right and also building the right thing, making sure that we're delighting the customer. Measuring the right thing. There's so many organizations that measure the wrong thing and have very unhealthy metrics. Having some steering. And then what the important point is at the bottom of the foundation is creating a strategic balance across the pillars, assessing, recalibrating to the pillars as you make improvement, as you advance, and then focusing on continuous improvement, but not just in one pillar, across them. So the company I was talking about they were very mature in the first pillar, the development and test automation. They were all in on continuous integration. They were all in on ATD and BDD. But where they lost it is if you look to the far right in the third pillar, the cross-functional team practices, they didn't understand user stories. They didn't understand the value proposition of them. They didn't understand this notion of three amigo-based conversations, where it's not just about writing code, it's not just about writing automation. So they were disconnected. They were weak on the right side. Actually, they were relatively weak on the second and third pillar, and they were strong on the first. And I didn't want them to stop doing the programming, but what I wanted, the thing for them to do was to rebalance and to start focusing on, hey, write less ATD automation, and why don't you stop and smell the roses and learn how to write better stories and then connect the dots back to your ATDD. So I hope you get a feeling for the pillars from that point of view. There's a basic foundation, and then the three pillars are what I would call technology, and then good old-fashioned testing practices, and then this collaboration. The third pillar is cross-functional team practices or collaboration. Health, maybe courage, actually. I think courage would fall. The courage to stop the line, the courage to do good work would fall into that third pillar as well. So that professionalism is the third pillar is also about professionalism. Mary, I've just talked a load. Can I ask you to sort of
Sure.
pitch in?
So, the foundation is just that. You have to have this foundation. And actually, several instances when I've come into quality organizations where they've implemented Agile and the whole team didn't own quality. It was one of those scenarios where you came out, release happens, and everybody looks at the testers and say, what happened? How come you missed that bug? And it was always a question to the testers. And I'm like, why are you just asking the testers how they missed the bug? Why isn't a whole team retrospective on how did the whole team miss that bug? And so it's a quality change that I kind of try to instill that when you have a severe incident that comes out from a release, the whole team has a retrospective on it, tries to get better. So trying to build that whole team as quality, even to the point where you're in a planning session and QA's overbooked capacity by 40 hours. Well, it doesn't mean that QA should stay over capacity 40 hours. It means that why don't you drop the lowest priority story on your sprint or in your Kanban process and have the developers help test. In testing during hardening sprints and things like that. So trying to really invest the whole team owns quality. And it's actually a culture change. To most teams, it's not an easy transition, but it's important that it's not just QA's job to own quality. You have to build quality in. I got an email one time from my boss who emailed me and said the CTO would really like to have no bugs the next release. And I wrote back and I said, I hope you sent this to the dev managers as well, because it's just not on the QA team to find all the bugs. Knowing the right thing to build and building it right. I think having really good cross-team collaboration, really good grooming sessions, really good product roadmaps and visions and things like that, and discussions with the whole team. Some of the best teams that build it right the first time were teams that had a really good PM or PO that would actually have a roadmap, get the whole team to buy into that roadmap and her vision, and the whole team then over sprints and time will get really enthusiastic about building these features and functionalities for this PO. And so having that conversation lead into better grooming sessions, led into better acceptance criteria, led into better quality and less churn over time.
Even in this case, there's a balancing act between, I think QA in general, or testing in general, is focused on building it right more than it is, are we building the right thing? And if I had a balancing act, I would say focus more on is it solving the customer's problem? Yes, we want to qualify what we've given them, but make sure, and it's QA's job, or it's the team's job. But this is an area where QA and testers can really shine, is making sure that they're engaging the client, making sure that their eyes sparkle when we start showing them, slices of a feature or slices of a use case. And if not, get that feedback. So it's not just testing it, it's not just verifying correctness, but are we solving the right problem?
one of the things I've implemented recently in my past 2 companies, I actually learned it when I worked with Bob at iContact, was I actually have my QA engineers sitting with customer support every quarter. And then I also have that gives them the view of what are our current issues of how we didn't build it right the first time, and how the use cases for the customer, because they actually hear those customers in those use cases, because our customers, we can't go and visit, right? I also have them sitting with our launch team. We're building, we are implementing this new customer, how they're going to use our system. And so again, having the QA sit with those people implementing our software gives us a view of here's the use cases of how people want to use our software. And then we actually have a group here at Channel Visor that actually uses our software to manage other clients. And I actually have them sitting with them as well to say, here's the actual customer, which is our company, and how do they use it? So it's been really a good thing for the testers over time to help with those better grooming conversations. Healthy Agile-centric metrics. Me and Bob have loved this one. Over time, I feel like I told Bob I probably could spend half my job trying to explain good Agile metrics to my bosses. When I was at a bank recently, the metrics that they had me trying to do was around heavy, how many test cases each person create, how many, the traditional waterfall metrics. And I kept pushing back and said, what decisions are you making from these? And it was one of those things where I would talk to Bob, and I'm like, Bob, they're solving the wrong problem. And they're not, these metrics that we're collecting are not having any value. And we came up with a discussion in the 4 areas that he likes to do is quality, value, prediction, and team. Do you want to go a little bit into that?
A little bit. I mean, the real key thing here is to get away from, the core thing that we're trying to say is move from test metrics. I think it's really dangerous. You've gone to Agile, and now we continue to do business analysis metrics or development metrics or QA team metrics. So test cases run per tester per day per bathroom break. Those kind of vertical metrics. When you go Agile, they're very, very sort of contrary to this whole team view. And what we need to do, so the bottom line is, instead of measuring what I would call silo-based metrics or functional metrics, measure the throughput of the team. So all of these 4-tier metrics are focused on the team. Now, within the team, then, what are you going to measure? Quality. Pick a few things that you think are critical to measure the quality of the output of the team. Measure a few things that are focused on the value. Are you delighting the customer? Are you delivering high value first? Prediction. Things like velocity, maybe not the best thing, but throughput. Estimation accuracy. Not that the estimation is attractive, but is the team able to, are they able to estimate and then deliver in a predictive fashion so you can do release planning? And then team health, team morale becomes a factor. Is the team, it's not an HR metric, is the team honestly having fun? Is the team honestly, allowed to be innovative and creative? And it's those 4 buckets that I usually recommend to organizations. Pick a few critical things in each one, measure them, and if they're not having an effect, and measure them on the outbound side. Yep. They're output, they're not input metrics, they're output metrics. What are you delivering? And if they're not changing behavior, and look at trending, if you're not changing behavior, if they don't matter, then change them. And also ask you, Mary's big on this. I love it when Mary says this, ask the team, ask the team, ask the team. These metrics shouldn't be created by pointy-headed managers. They should be created, pointy-headed managers matter, but they should also be inclusive of the team.
And for those of you, because we don't really talk about metrics much more throughout this presentation, but for those of you quality metrics that I do care about, I only really have 4. The first one is how many sub 1, sub 2 issues do you find in your hardening period, right before you're about to go to production? How many sub 1, sub 2 issues do you find post-release? How much automation tests do you have? And are you finding defects with them? A lot of times we have automation that never find any defects.
I like that metric. It's not just the automation. You could say coverage, but it's really the quantity or the, and is it trending? Are you increasing? And are they breaking or not? So is it resilient automation? Yeah. And then what is it? Is it valuable? Is it valuable automation? Yeah. So there was a pure case of Mary bringing reality to me, which I need that all the time, as you all can tell. What's next?
So steering is required, so center of excellence or community of practice type steering. At the end of the day, you need somebody in your organization to be able to explain what good Agile testing looks like. And at the end of the day, not a lot of QA and QA managers know what good Agile testing looks like. And so when you do find these people, and it doesn't have to be a QA manager, it could be a center of excellence or a community of practice, a group of people that says, hey, here's our experiences, here's what good practices look like, here's what works in our organization, them steering the quality process through that organization, through those Agile teams. So I've had it both ways. Either I'm being the leader or we had a community of practice pushing the process changes through. Either work, but when you have nothing, then it kind of goes down to the siloed-based development-driven Agile teams, which, not that that's wrong, because you have books like How Google Tests Software, and they're very development-centric. But Bob and I feel like the QA on the team have a craft that they bring that is very valuable, and that we need that person on the team.
I mean, let's be clear. We're not saying it's bad. People can do, people are people. They can do whatever they want. But that Google and Microsoft and Facebook, SDET, fire testers and developers do all the testing model, I think we both fundamentally disagree with it. Now, it's not, do whatever you want, Google and Facebook, but I think I've worked with such profound professional testers that complemented Agile teams so nicely and provided so much value that for me, I would never want to build a team without the profession of software. So that's inherent to the 3 pillars. We don't say it that way in any of the slides, but we're really sort of embellishing what I would call the profession of testing, and we're not throwing it away, or we're not saying development is going to do all of that. The final point on this one is strategic balance. What we're saying, and then we'll move on to the pillars, the meat of the pillars, is you have to balance. It goes back to that example we talked about. A company is very strong on one and incredibly weak on the other. What we want you to do as you're creating your strategies is pick a practice from each of the pillars, develop them, pick integrated practices, develop them together, mature them together, assess them together, come up with an assessment tool, recalibrate, look at, hey, are we focusing on the right thing? And then focus your improvement not in one pillar and then the next, but across the board. And it's really crucial. I think that's the essence of why we are presenting this model, is so that you don't go down and drill in and become excellent in one place, because you know what? I don't think you can. I don't think you can become an effective, mature Agile shop by drilling into one area and sort of starving other areas.
To that point, Bob, I will actually use the 3 pillars as a scorecard. That's my assessment. And check, yes, we're doing it. Plus, minus, we're working on it. X, we're not doing that. And that gives me a view of the areas that we need to improve on.
Absolutely. We're working on one of the things, we're working on a book on the 3 pillars, and as part of that, we're introducing a lightweight assessment tool. It's not intended to grade people or to hire or fire people, but we think assessment and recalibration and continuous improvement is really important as a part of the pillars. So look for that. We have a bit of an ebook we're going to offer with the event, but we're also going to deliver the book over time. So look for the full book to come out, and that should help in those areas.
So the first main, I would say main pillar, they're all important, equally important to what Bob's saying, is test automation. Fundamentally, you can't go fast in Agile without having a good automated suite underneath it. The first being very important, the first bullet, a pyramid-based strategy. I'm not sure if anyone on the line is familiar with Mike Cohn's automation strategy or automation pyramid, but at the foundation of the pyramid, you have to have a solid set of unit tests. And then as you go up the pyramid, integration tests are a little less, but equally important. And then at the top of the triangle pyramid is the UI test. And you want to have the least amount of those, because that's the most fragile and what changes all the time. And with that said, you need to have a strategy at each level. So for instance, if you're a C# app, you would hopefully have unit tests in unit or MB unit, From an integration test level, I use a tool called SpecFlow. You could actually just use the integration tool within NUnit or NB unit. And at the UI level, we have Selenium, SpecFlow Drive and Selenium. And so we have very much a strategy based on here's the tools that we're going to use, here's the type of tests that we're going to use at each level. And at every Scrum team, we have 11 here, is set on this approach. So we're all on the same common platform. And if somebody wants to introduce a new testing tool, you kind of have to go through Bob always says it's like a tool bake-off, because we have a good strategy. What is this tool going to give us that our current tool set doesn't? Continuous integration is, so you can have all the tests you want. If you don't have CI, then there's not much value. So I've come into many organizations where I walked in and there's been one QA engineer who basically has taken their time and did a lot of like Selenium tests on the local PC. And it runs every night on the local PC, but nobody gets to see the results of it. And so if you don't have your tests going through a continuous integration system that's along with the unit tests, along with the integration tests, and that builds are showing, goes back to the visual feedback boards 2 steps down, that you can see that, yes, the build passed, and the deploy passed, and then your unit test passed, and then your integration test passed, then there's not much value. So you need to have the CI process, visual feedback boards, all part of your automation strategy as a package, and doing all 3 to really get the most value out of your strategy. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you're right on.
So one of the next big things, so when I've come into organizations before who didn't even have tools, or they had selected a tool that wasn't really valuable, I've asked the QA team, once we've selected the tool of choice to move forward with, to actually create stories in their in Jira or Rally, whatever Agile, wherever your product backlog is, whatever tool that is using. Ask them to put in like their QA technical debt into the backlog along with the development technical debt and the product technical debt. And the point being is we have regression test cases that we need to get automated. We have business logic, or we actually are, maybe our automation framework is needing some work, or additional tools, or we just got a bunch of technical debt, lack of coverage, things like that. And so I asked the QA to put all of their stories into that backlog and then start attacking it every sprint, getting buy-in. And this is a lot where my job is, from a test leader comes in, getting the PMs and the Scrum Masters and the Dev Managers to get bought in, to put these stories in sprints, making sure that they understand that automation is important, making that a culture of their team, and slowly starting to make their way through the backlog of QA technical debt.
I mean, the important point there is, and I found this, it's sort of humorous. So many teams complain, oh, they don't listen to me, they don't allow us to fix our own problem. But then when I ask them to write the stories, they're like, oh, well, really? They want someone else to do it. They want Mary to do it for them. They want someone else to do it. And really, the product owner or Mary or managers can't. The team is in the best position to do that. And what we want is to put it in the backlog, make it transparent, size it, decompose it, come up with strategies so that we're effectively, this strategy, the game plan, the development, you have to put it in terms of the business the product owner can understand. You have to make those little mini business cases. That's where you make it. That's where you attack this pyramid, because this is all technical work, if you will. And that's where you get the justification for it, if you will, or the support. And it's not magic. It doesn't magically happen, but if it's not in the backlog, you're never going to get that.
Yeah. One thing note, just to jump back a little bit on the automation tooling strategy that you do, I have found if you're going to have developers help attacking your legacy QA debt, is to pick the tools that are in the same language of the application or what the developers are coding in. I found it get a lot more help from developers if I'm using a C# automation tool versus a Ruby automation tool on a C# app. So just a thing to note there.
Well, I mean, that's required here. Go under the days in this pillar where QA owns automation. Yeah. It's now shared with the development staff. It's a team-based automation strategy. So for us to myopically go out there and pick an archaic tool,
yep.
that has, I'm not mentioning any names, but an archaic tool that has an archaic, functional scripting language that no one likes, where it costs an arm and a leg on a per seat basis, well then you can't distribute it to all the developers. So you really need to, we need to consider them as our partners in it, and that starts with that.
And where I draw the line, because it gets hairy in between the unit test and integration test level, right? Unit tests, I feel like the developers do own the unit tests. The UI tests, I could say QA can own that. But the integration test is really where the partnership comes in, and where QA and developers need to work together to say what makes sense, or who to do these tests. And so I have some QA on staff right now that can write C# code and can do the integration tests themselves. I have some that can't, so the developers will do that for them.
The final point here is this acceptance test-driven development or behavior-driven development. Think about what I was saying earlier, that company was making a mistake. I'm connecting it to the acceptance test, and it doesn't have to be automated to start with. The acceptance tests are conditions of business acceptance. They're little twinkles in the eye of the product owner that they're trying to communicate. These are critical areas that I want you to deliver, team. Well, then we can hook our hat on. We can manually do acceptance test verification, and that's fine. That causes us to have a conversation. Now, extending that, and we want to automate more. Well, then there's some wonderful tools in the Agile space that allow us to take those sort of conversation things called acceptance tests and then extend them and make them automated requirements. So that company was doing the right thing in that one pillar. They were way out of balance. It's another thing that what I've noticed in this pillar is a lot of companies we're perky technically. So we love the technical stuff. There's these juicy tool bits and cooking off. So I think it's very common for a lot of organizations to focus on pillar one first, and they lag in other areas. So don't be surprised when we go through the pillars, if you're like doing more stuff in this pillar. We're not saying it's bad, but you may want to reevaluate. Hey, are we doing too much here at the service of something else, and it's causing us maybe to not implement our automation properly or our CI properly, etc.
A good example of that, Bob, is the company you're talking about. Is I came in right after Bob on that, and when the company he was looking at, and long story short, I had a sub 1 come back from a release, and a button didn't work on a page, and I thought, how is that possible? And it was because they're so hardcore focused on the automation. Nobody ever just stopped and tried to do it by hand.
But that's my point. Right? It's not, you miss the sorry. Yeah. We apologize, or I apologize for that terrible phone noise. So, but absolutely, it's that balance of, guess what? The world is not just automated testing.
Yeah.
What about a good old manual testing is not the enemy.
No.
Sometimes you can fire something up or do exploration and find out. That's actually a nice segue into the next pillar, man.
Yeah, so software testing. So when you look at this, you're going to say, well, that's what I did in Waterfall. And actually, what we did in Waterfall wasn't a bad thing, right? I executed Waterfall testing perfectly, and it worked for me for a long time, and nothing's wrong with it. But at the end of the day, we still have to keep some of those foundational items as a software craft that we need to do you can't just because we're Agile doesn't mean you can't do that anymore. And so the first one is risk-based testing. Now, I feel like in Agile this is probably the most important characteristic for a QA engineer to be able to do, and it's more of, I want to have a conversation with them of what are you not testing, and understanding that completely versus what they're going to test, because what they're going to test is they're going to do that, right? But tell me calculatedly what you're not going to test and why. And so you've got to have some risk-based testing techniques. You can't just, gone are the days where you just say, well, I don't think it touches this area, so I think I'm not going to do that. You've got to put in some strategies around deciding what to test and what not to test.
I mean, the good news here should be, for most of you, that you have good skills. So what we're saying is don't throw out those waterfall skills.
Yeah.
I hope everyone who's listening to us understands what risk-based testing is, functional risk-based testing, non-functional risk-based testing, how to involve clients in deciding and prioritizing what we're going to test, how to communicate effectively, to Mary's point, like what's more important is what we're not going to test.
Yeah.
And then to drive that conversation, is everyone comfortable with us not testing performance this release?
Yep.
And if someone says no, okay, so what's the trade-off? So you're negotiating, if you will, coverage and where we show the light in the application. You should have had that in Waterfall. I hope most of you have had that. The difference in Agile is it's an iterative. It's so highly iterative. Now you're doing that often, and you're reevaluating. Hey, what do I have the time to do risk-based testing with, and how do I look at the things I haven't covered?
Yep.
And I'm looking at my test risk.
If you don't have your automation to a point where you've got it, your full regression running every night, you can't regression test every change that goes into a 2-week sprint. It just doesn't happen. So you have to do your functional testing, figure out what from an integrated integration perspective, and then what small area of regression that you might have to hit from a manual testing perspective. Test planning, this is a big one for me lately. I've come into at least 2 to 3 organizations where the minute you walk in, they're like, oh, we don't test plan anymore. We just create test cases every sprint, and that's our test planning. And I said, well, okay, what happens if you got a certain epic that might be sprint, spans 2 or 3 or 4 sprints? High level, what's your test plan look like? And they're like, well, we just test every story per sprint. And there's been a lot of holes in that philosophy of not looking at it from a holistic view like we used to do it from a waterfall level. So there are definitely things that we have to do to measure test planning at a release and sprint levels. You just don't throw that away anymore.
Exploratory testing is something, and we don't have the time in this talk to define it and explain it. So it's an exercise for the listeners. If you don't know what exploratory testing is, then go do some Google search. Look for James Bach and John's Bach. Look for satisfice.com, and you can get a lot of information around it. The key thing from a pillar's point of view is exploratory testing rocks. It can be collaborative. It can be a way of defining new test cases. Mary made an incredibly important point earlier about involving customer support or customer-facing people. It can be a way of pairing developers plus customer support, testers plus customer support, and doing very, very fast exploratory testing of an app. It fits nicely into sprints. It can fit nicely. It can certainly fit nicely into release tempo and release trains. And it has the thing that I like about it and why I insert it in here and I get passionate about it. Forget the testing aspects. I think it fosters collaboration. I think it shows people how they can work together and how they can pair. And then these Agile teams then learn how to pair outside of the exploratory testing. So it reinforces that collaboration that's natural in Agile.
The next one is one near to my heart. It's been interesting working at least 4 or 5 Agile companies now. Every time I've come in, the first thing I said, okay, so where is your standard operating procedures of how QA operates?
I've noticed you said you do focus on that.
I do.
Right off the top.
I do, but
I thought Agile wasn't about standards and practices and checklists.
So what do new hires do on the first day of work? How do you explain to them?
They be Agile. You just say be Agile, fly, be free.
Yeah, so this is one of the things I've been passionate about because I've come into many organizations that are like, okay, we're Agile, no documentation. So at Contact, I got there, and Bob will tell you they bought a test case management tool, and everybody just stopped using it. And so we didn't have any place that we were writing our test cases consistently. We had no standard operating procedures, nothing, or no standard repositories. So everything was everywhere. You still have to have a lot of those things. I have a standard operating procedure document that says, here's how you do your job at X company, and here's what a sprint is, and here's our Agile testing risk-based techniques, and here's our automation framework, and here's where we store our test cases and our test plans. And
we said it, this is the pillar that says don't throw everything out.
Yeah.
In fact, please don't bring waterfall practices into Agile as is. So I have this weird term, it's not a real word, it's called agilify. We need to agilify our standards, our checklists, our templates, our repositories, etc.
Yeah.
But don't throw them out, or don't look at it as a get out of jail free card. And you really it's really important to sort of stay true to ourselves. And then finally, the last point is really, it's this balance. Again, if there's a key word that comes out of this, be balanced. And so in this pillar, don't just focus on automation, don't just focus on manual, don't just focus on exploratory, but look across that spectrum and create a balanced view of how are you leveraging those different ways of testing and doing performance testing or whatever, and however you're doing it across your sprint tempo and your release tempo to create balanced feedback and balanced quality and balanced customer integration. Third pillar is cross-functional team practices. You could call it the soft and squishy practices. You call it mindset practices. I can call it the professionalism. So these are the things. These are characteristics. This is the professionalism. I'll call pairing. That's why I got perky about the exploratory testing. I really look for pairing in healthy, mature Agile teams. And it's not just developer. Early on in the extreme programming space, XP said there's going to be pair programming. We've moved beyond that. We're looking for, today, I think the key thing is opportunistic, common sense pairing from developer to developer, developer to tester to product owner. Call them the three amigos, call them the triad. That's that three amigos where you're working together. Part of this is the mindset, having a stop-the-line mindset. I know Mary talks about this a lot. So we can have automation, we can have information mediators, and things can be failing. And if people ignore it, it doesn't matter. If you don't fix broken tests, if you don't look at root cause, it's not an Agile mindset. You need to take those indicators and do something with it. And I remember that I contact developers would come up to me sometimes, and it's like, oh, we can comment out those tests. So we can fix them by essentially removing them. And they were looking for permission. Like, Bob, can we have permission to comment out the 100 tests because they're really not working right now? And I'm like, well, is there an option to fix them as well and to make them, if they have, so either remove them if they have no value, but if they still have value, then and they had value last week and they still have value, well, then I think the real answer is to fix them. So stop the line and fix them.
One of my favorite stories to tell is I was at a company and I came in and they had like already 5,000 tests or something like that written, and I looked at the monitor when I got in that day. I said, oh, your build's red or your tests are red, and what's up with that? And the developer looks at me and says, well, they've never been green. And I'm like, okay, so are you going to fix them? I'm not going to fix them. I mean, the QA needs to fix them. And I'm like, okay. And so it took about 3 to 4 months to get stories on sprints to get the technical debt cleaned up about how we wrote fragile tests or didn't have data environments, or maybe we had environment problems in general. And one day I came up and everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, what is everybody looking at me for? And they said, look at the monitor. And the whole monitor was green. And I almost wanted to cry because everybody was so excited to have gotten the test green. And so I bought them pizza. And I came back like 4 hours later, and the board was ready again.
But at least you had that moment of passing.
But they took another week to get it green, and when they got it green, I bought them pizza again. I said, no more pizza.
But that's the mind. So, and this is what's really important in this pillar. A lot of folks, we say we're Agile. We say, the automation. We talk a good game about automating, but you have to be relentless in how we approach technical debt. Technical debt doesn't fix itself. You need people who are committed to improving the product. Customers aren't delighted by themselves. You don't say I have a stop the line mindset. You show people that you have a stop the line mindset. You see a green test, and you as a team member, you have responsibility and accountability. You do something about it, or you don't. Code reviews and standards. You have the pride and ownership. You realize that processes count, that two sets of eyes really, really matter, and that code reviews are not an old waterfall concept, but effective pair reviews are part, I think, of the quality landscape. So you don't test in quality, you build it in. And this is the pillar where we talk about practices to build it in. Aggressive refactoring of technical debt. So we talk a good game, technical debt. Agile's coined that term. Everyone sort of understands what that term is. They understand what the term refactoring is, redesign. But then there's this sort of, call it committed refactoring, call it technical debt, call it we're committed to writing stories. The product owners are committed to making better products, and slowly we incrementally do it. Three amigo-based conversations. This is the place we say we're a whole team, but in the book you have some stories, Mary, that talk about the tester who the developer and the product owner always meet, and this poor tester is sort of hovering around the team. So there's a cobbled together, there's two amigos and one poor starving amigo who's never part of the conversations and feels left out. Well, to me, that's a cultural thing. That's a practice thing. That's a soft skill thing. That's collaborative. You were coaching that tester to get in the game, but we also need to coach the developer and the product owner not to have conversations without their third leg. You can't have a stool without 3 legs. well, you need this commitment to these cross-team functional practices. And it's deeper. So this takes time. This pillar is not easy. Everyone says they have done this. Everyone says they're managing technical debt. Everyone says, if you talk to people, they're writing user stories. Everyone says, oh yeah, we stopped the line, or we're doing pairing. This is, when I measure this, it's, are you deeply doing it? Are you doing it even when you're not told to? Do you do it when people aren't even looking? So do you, if no one is in the building on a Saturday and a test goes red, do you actually fix it? That's a test for this third pillar, I think, is it deeply in your DNA? And I think this pillar out of all three connects to those foundational principles that they all do, but this one in particular connects to those foundational principles that we were talking about. Did you want to finish? Did you have anything to say about the three pillars as a wrap-up, Mary? Anything come to mind?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think, still remembering that the whole team owns quality is paramount here. And so, making sure that I, as a test leader in the organization, will actually show this three pillars to the developers on the team, to the engineering managers, to the product owners. I go through each step with them so that they understand what my vision of good quality agile practices look like, and make sure that they understand that. Don't come to me and say, why did testing miss that step one? You need to say, why did the team miss that step one?
You actually inspired me. I had thought about this maybe 10 minutes ago and to say something, and then I didn't. This is not for, so this is for leadership, but it's not just for QA leadership. You don't lead, and you're alluding to this, I just want to be clear. The three pillars is a wonderful quality and testing strategy model for agile teams, but it's not just for the QA director or QA manager. They can't do it in a vacuum, period. It has to be, so whoever is leading the product organization, or organizations, whoever is leading the development organizations, and whoever is leading the QA organizations. Talk about three amigos. They are the three amigos that are driving the pillars. Sure, a director of QA can make some progress, but if you're in an organization where the development leadership doesn't care about inspections, and they have so the QA director has a whole team view, but the development director doesn't, and that's what they're messaging to their team, then you don't have a snowball's chance of creating a whole team view. Maybe people will say it, but is it really in their DNA? And it's not. So part of this is always think of what I would call management or leadership integration, and alignment is an important part.
And for me, I'll tell you, I spend 70% of my day partnering with dev managers, product owners, VPs of product owners, and going up and going down, building these relationships to change the culture of these teams.
But also to empower your teams.
Empowerment.
And it's not just, they're not your teams, but the teams.
Yeah.
For that whole team quality view. It's how do you create that culture? So what I'm saying is I'm actually aggressive. That is your job,
yeah,
to do that. Even if it's uncomfortable or painful or whatever, that complements the pillars. Yeah. So it all starts with empowering testers and creating this whole team view towards quality. Critical early steps. We'll talk about a little bit of strategy, wrapping up the presentation. We'll talk about strategy a bit. Creating a sense of empowered functional teams. We want to, in all of our language, we want to talk about the team, not dev, versus QA versus BA, or versus architecture. You want to apply testing standards across the teams. We didn't say that earlier, but it's not just standards per team, and it's not the inmates running. So please don't put standards and checklists out on a team-by-team basis and say, make it up here. Here's a model. Now do whatever the heck you want. At scale, it really matters to have common tools. A non-trivial definition of done that's relatively well understood. Sure, you can customize a little bit team to team. If you have a team doing security software versus one doing UI, can they customize their DoD a little bit? Sure, and make it their own. But they shouldn't throw out things that are relevant for the entire organization.
The worst thing, the real reasons I usually get hired is the teams go from 2 to 4 Scrum teams or 4 to 8, and then now you have 8 QA. Typically, there's 8 QA or 2 on each Scrum team, and you go have 8 QA on the 8 to 16 QA doing their own things and doing it completely differently. And so I come in and I spend the first 6 months to a year getting their standards the same.
When I hear that, and that's Agile. The second argument, so you observe that. The second thing you say is everyone convinces you, well, that's the Agile way of things. And I'm arguing, I hear you, but no, it's not. Right? Consistency matters. Standards matter. Professionalism matters. We want to give the team, bandwidth. You want the team to be self-directed, but there needs to be constraints. And so don't be shy about that. Define a core set of Agile KPI and metrics and have constraints. Really encourage your testers. I see this pattern so often where they're inactive participants in grooming or backlog refinement and sprint planning. They're sort of in there, but if the developers say it's a 5-point story and the testers think it's a 20-point story, the developers shout them over and then they acquiesce. Or when you're doing sprint planning, they're planning a sprint and it's a scrum or fall sprint. And they don't say anything. And everyone walks out of the sprint planning session and it's, oh, kumbaya, we're a team, go team, we're all on board. But you've just planned a scrum or fall sprint and you haven't said anything. So encourage the testers to become really active, because it's not that you have a differing opinion. You're letting your team down. It's in the entire team's best interest not to plan the scrum or fall sprint. It's not just a QA problem. It's a team problem. So some early steps to think about moving, strategies to have pillar thinking moving forward. Training is another thing to really focus on. Teaming, for example, even things that you wouldn't think would be applicable to development teams or test teams, but the 5 dysfunctions of a team by Pat Lencioni, we've gotten tremendous traction out of that as a model to build teamwork, to build trust. And that's actually, believe it or not, that's trust in test teams. Not all test teams have trust in one another or across test teams, or the testers doing, and then the testers doing automation, and then it's within the teams, the cross-functional teams as well. So think in terms of story writing, like that initial story I talked about. We actually did an ad hoc class for that group to show them what story writing 101 was. So don't get full of yourselves and think we know how to do this stuff. Think in terms of initial training, think in terms of fine-tuning training, think in terms of soft skills like 5 dysfunctions, building up trust. Don't just assume. Some other critical early steps, coaches and scrum masters reinforce the swarming. So your coaches and scrum masters are your best friends. Mary, I hope that you've shared the 3 pillars with those folks so that they understand that balance matters, and you can't be everywhere. So what you're doing is empowering the coaches to coach the teams. Aggressive doneness for all teams, implement coding standards, release planning before allowing teams to start sprint number 1. What I'm saying there is don't be shy about asking a team to plan. Another way of saying it is don't be shy, don't be reluctant to make sure that the team knows where the heck it's going. I will stop it. I will throw my body in front of the team if I get the inkling that they honestly don't know what they're going to build at the end of the sprint. I mean, they have lots of work, but is it going to is it going to delight the customer? They don't really know. I would rather pause them and make sure that they are aligned properly than let them just create stuff. And then backlogs have bug. We were talking about the balance. A very common number that you can think of is 20% of a backlog for infrastructure and automation and refactoring that's not an overzealous investment. I think that's a reasonable investment. A lot of companies hover around 15, 20, 25% in their backlogs to sort of reinforce the investment in products as opposed to features. So features versus investment.
Bob, is the bugs part of that 20%?
It could be or not. In some organizations it has been that I've been a part of. In some organizations they separated. You have sort of what I would call high priority bugs versus backlogs. If I have a defect backlog that I'm trying to chip away at, then that might be part of that 20%. But I also probably have a critical set of bugs, and they may not be part of that. Have that. You and I just did it. Have that discussion. And make sure that we're creating. So it's not just balance in the pillars; it's balance in your backlog. Yeah. I call it featureitis. Have you ever seen, Mary, featureitis backlog? So the percentage there is 100%. Exactly, 100% features and 0% everything else. And everyone is so very feature focused. It's like over time you can run that way for a few sprints, But if you're running that way for a year, shame on you, because you're not investing in your product.
And from a QA leadership perspective, those are the teams that have the hardest time getting automation going, because that's the first thing that will go when they're trying to get new features out. And you say, hey, let's automate this, and they're like, no, we don't have time.
Absolutely.
So continuously communicating your unified vision. So this goes back to what Bob said. You have, and what I passion myself and do every day is I align and share this vision between development, quality, and product. I mean, every quarter create a roadmap. Every quarter go and make sure that development, quality, and product teams know where I'm at in the roadmap. I refine the roadmap based on their feedback, and so everybody's aligned and shared to what my vision is from a QA perspective. You know, keep working your strategy across the pillars. You don't get stuck down one silo. And so that's why I use the pillars as a scorecard. If you were to go look at my scorecard right now, I have a check in one check in each pillar. I'm not very far to turn the ship, but my goal at the end of the year is have about 3 things in each pillar checked off, but nothing fully down one side. I'm working a little bit in each pillar every day to get better. Make your strategy visible, so information radiators. This is an interesting one, especially when you have cross teams in other continents, and so the information radiators can be something that sits in your desktop and shows pass-fail test coverages, or Jira boards, virtual boards. It could be many different things.
I mean, there's harder ones and there's easier ones. Yeah. Sort of 3 amigos, it would be really hard to have an like a tool-based information radiators for counting 3 amigo conversations.
Yep.
But you said it earlier, automation trending.
Yep.
How are we trending with automation? What's our pass-fail rates on our automation?
Yep.
And celebrating the trending, having a little alarm that goes off. If you ever increase by 5% in a release automation, like having an applause meter or something like that, so that you celebrate. Those to me, so information radiators where they can be, and they should be driving celebration. They should be driving recognition. They should be driving talk about them in. Forget the information radiator.
Town halls.
Talk about them in town halls. Talk about it in sprint reviews.
One of my favorite stories to tell is at Eye Contact, we finally got our automation green, and Bob was really happy with this. And in a town hall, he pulls the automation team up front and gives us beer, Old Chub beer to be exact. But the whole team was just super excited and sent us out to the movies for the day. So I mean, it was a huge success, and it was really good to celebrate that in front of everybody.
And that's part of this. It's sharing, it's transparency, it's clarity. One final thing on this slide is visualize your organization. So we may be making it sound like all life is good and it's a yellow brick road and all you do is follow it. We are not. Mary's not naive. I may be naive, but there's stuff is happening all the time. There's stuff getting in our way. You can even make the impediments visual. You can even make the impediments, talk about them, attack them, make them visible, talk about them in a leadership level, confront, if you have a development leader or whoever it is who's not aligning with with the pillars, do something about it. Don't just acquiesce. And then have quarterly readouts. So never overreact or underreact with data points. Always look at the trending and the improvement over time. And celebrate any improvements you have, like Mary was illustrating. That's incredibly important. So we're wrapping it up. The pillars, we're not going to take questions. We'll take questions in the next hour, so queue them up. Please be ready. We're looking forward to it. But we're going to stick a fork in it. We're done. This is the 3 pillars. I'm Mary. No, I'm Bob. And this is Mary.
Thank you guys for coming out and listening.
We really want to thank everyone for being a part. We want to thank EuroSTAR for the opportunity, and we want to thank everyone for paying attention, hanging in with us. And we're using this. I really want you to take a look at it. I really want you to try and adopt the pillars in your Agile testing. It is not a silver bullet, but I am finding almost universally that it helps in your Agile strategy. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.
And watch for the book that's coming out over the next 6 to 12 months.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.